So I am Kelly McSwain with the Office of Research Development, and today's session is on writing to the reviewer. It's part of a series that we've been doing this semester on successful grant writing and grant seeking. So this is actually the final one of the semester. So hopefully we will get some stuff scheduled for next semester and next year, and be sure to check our events page for that. Let's see here. So yeah, the agenda for today is we're just going to do some brief introductions, and then we'll move into our panel discussion, and then there will be time for questions. This time slot is allotted for 2 hours. I kind of envision it being about an hour, but if the discussion goes super lively, then we can carry on, and because we have this 2-hour time frame. So just so you know. So yeah, just a little background on the Office of Research Development. We're within the Division of Research. Some of the things that we do in our office is faculty support, institutional advancement, and helping find funding opportunities. So you've probably interacted with me with limited submission process and internal funding opportunities, such as the R initiatives. We also hold workshops. We can help find funding. We do the NSF Career Academy, and also been working on an NIH accelerator program. So we are happy to help you with any of these types of services. So yeah, feel free to contact me or my colleagues, Jane Jacoby, Mariah Meacham, and our Associate Vice President for Research Development, Sheila Cotton. That is our team. A couple of our resources, we have an entire archive of all of the past workshops. So if you missed something, if you want to watch something again, we have those on our website on the events link. I mentioned the R initiatives. So there is actually a deadline for some of those today. So if you aren't already working on it, or haven't already submitted, you might be a little late to that one. But look out for some more opportunities coming in the spring. I think there's one more deadline in the fall too. I am racked up in the deadline that's today. So we also are working on a proposal repository. So that should be coming soon. Just collecting some proposals to get in there and uploading it. So we will send out an announcement when that gets released. And I will go ahead and let our panelists introduce themselves. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be watching it as well as my team members. And so yeah, I think I have them in alphabetical order by last name. So Bart, you are first.
All right. So I'm Bart Knijdenburg. You can just call me Bart. I'm an associate professor in human-centered computing in the School of Computing. I mostly submit proposals to the NSF. I just checked. I think my success rate is about 30% in NSF proposals. So that's pretty decent. I had one really big, single PI 700K grant from the US Army at some point, so I can give some tips on how to write for that. I tried DARPA once, that never went anywhere, and I've had really decent success getting corporate funding. I have a good working relationship with Facebook, now Meta. Have several research grants from them, and several of my PhD students have PhD fellowships from them. And as a reviewer, I have mostly, almost exclusively reviewed for NSF, things like small proposals, medium proposals, career proposals, things like that.
Awesome, thank you, Bart. Next is, where's my alphabetical order? No, there it is, okay. I was like, I know I put them in alphabetical order. All right, here you go.
Sorry about that. Good morning, all. Thank you, Kelly, for finding space for me and having an inclusive panel this morning. I am B. Chad Starks, and I am a research assistant professor currently here in the Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice Department. I am the director of the Social Justice Research and Advocacy Hub, housed in our School of Behavior, Social and Health Sciences, yet It is an interdisciplinary approach. So some of you may be hearing and hopefully seeing from me in the near future. I've most often submitted proposals to the National Science Foundation, but I did leave off some proposals and acceptance that I've done historically. President Obama was in office with the Safe Communities Initiative Act, and have received funding through some of those government small funding places like that. I've only reviewed for the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program. My confirmed bias degree is in the home of criminology. So I'm excited to be here to share some of my experiences with writing and framing, and trying to look through the lens and understand how to frame language in a way that it'll be received, but yet hold on to the values and principles of creating some macro level change. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sarah, you are next.
Good morning. I'm Sarah White. I'm a professor and nursery extension specialist in the Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences and College of Ag, Forest, and Life Sciences. And I've submitted proposals to USDA, NSF, and USGS. I have been most successful in the USDA realm, specifically specialty crop research initiatives where grants are funded for up, between $2 and $10 million. And I was fortunate enough to lead one of those in 2014. So I have a pretty good perspective on what it takes to write successful grants. And then I've also served as a reviewer for USDA, EPA, and then also NEFA. And I'm not going to remember what FFAR stands for. It might come to me later if someone actually cares. But I have been not only a reviewer for USDA, but also a panel manager. So I have a bit of insight on successful grant writing for USDA.
Awesome, thank you. I think that's a lot of letters in there for us to digest. All right, and last but not least, Brooke Whitworth.
Hi, I'm Brooke Whitworth. I'm an associate professor of science education and our doctoral program for my coordinator for our department. I have submitted proposals to NSF, IES, Spencer, private foundations, Toyota, and State Department of Educations. Bart, you made me look up what my success rate was at NSF, and it's about 25%. So I've been pretty successful there and have submitted to several different calls there. And I have reviewed for NSF. So looking forward to sharing and answering questions today.
Awesome, thank you all. So let's go ahead and jump into the panel. So kind of when I was putting together these questions, I was trying to think of how we can utilize our panelists that come from a wide range of colleges and backgrounds. So I'm hoping that we get a nice wide range of viewpoints and opinions and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I've always been fascinated with kind of this relationship with the reviewer and the proposal and how that relationship works. So I'm excited to hear everyone's opinions, but we can go ahead and start off with my first question, which is how has serving a reviewer changed your behavior as a writer, if at all? And you guys, I can call on you if you want, or if you guys just want to jump in. I know there's only 4 panelists, so we might not be worried about talking over each other so much since it's a kind of a smaller panel, but just let me know. I'm happy to facilitate either way.
I'm happy to go in the same order as we did before if you want.
Radical, yes. Okay, go ahead, Bart.
It has changed the way I write a little bit. Also, reading reviews on my own proposals. My first 2 NSF proposals both got accepted, but the first one that got rejected really changed my mind also. Like seeing a rejection is actually a good thing. But also being on a panel is useful in that regard. What I've noticed being on a panel is that it's easy to miss things. Once you have the panel discussion, it always happens with at least one proposal that I overlooked something or someone else overlooked something. So I can only imagine that it's possible for an entire panel to overlook something, which basically means that with care, you should emphasize the things that you want to, that are very important in your proposal, right? I've rewritten proposals where I realized, oh, the reviewers didn't really get this part. Like it's written there, right there, but they just didn't get it. You're reviewing 7, 8 NSF proposals in a short amount of time while you're also doing your teaching and your research. So you're not always going to be as careful. So I appreciate it if proposers actually re-emphasize some of the most important things in their proposal. So that's one thing. The other thing is when you have these panel discussions for the proposals, I've noticed it's fairly easy to sway others. So you sometimes see someone who gives something highly competitive or like an excellent or a very good, and someone else gives it unfair or even a poor. And then one of these two reviewers is usually spirited enough to kind of sway the others. And it's typically the lower end. What I've learned from that is to sometimes write a little bit more defensively, right? So if you feel like something could be misconstrued or someone could dislike something, kind of couch that in some language that, you know, can prevent an overly negative comment. And, you know, so to the extent that, you know, if you have one person who's really excited about your proposal and then the others are at the very least think it's reasonable, that's good. But if there's one negative one, that kind of tends to sway everything in the negative direction. Yeah. And then the final thing, I think, it rarely happens when I'm reviewing, especially for NSF at least, it rarely happens that I get a proposal that's exactly in my area of expertise. It's usually related. It's like human-computer interaction, something related to privacy, you know, and the things that I do, but something where I actually know the exact full literature, that almost never happens. So you really have to rely on the proposal to kind of guess whether the reviewer has, whether the proposer has enough expertise in this area. And so as a writer, I've gone through a little bit more lengths to kind of demonstrate that I have expertise in the thing that I'm proposing. Like I've done work in this area. I've served on conference committees in this area, things like that. And also to not demand any expertise from my audience, so that when I introduce a term that I think the people in my small area know about, I realize probably the NSF reviewers, perhaps more than half of them don't know about it, and they're not going to take the time to look it up. So I'll have to define that term in the proposal. Yeah, so re-emphasize things because they're easy to miss. Make sure you write defensively so that negative reviewers don't sway the panel, and show your expertise, but don't demand expertise from your reviewers.
Good insight, Bart. I guess I should share a little bit about the journey of how I think I got there. It may be a little different. I was included in grant proposals as a doctoral student, also as a project director. I went back to earn my PhD after leaving a professional world. So there was a gap between my master's degree and my doctoral studies. So I was viewed by a number of my mentors at my university as having a little more experience than a traditional doctoral student. So I was included to bring that level of skill set to the conversation. So I served as a project director on a number of grants and evaluator. So I really wasn't in tune with the entire writing of a grant. So I didn't really know exactly everything that happened. I learned that once I earned the PhD, and the Office of Juvenile Justice, Delinquency, and Prevention reached out and had me read 50 proposals that kind of made me aware that I may not have the skill set that government grant funding institutions are looking for. Here's what I mean. So in doing social justice work, there always has to be macro level change in the community. And I think it's a delicate balance between career, values, and what's important to you that you stand for, as well as understanding that you got to write grants in order to keep your job. And in that delicate balance, as the reviewer, it challenged me on a personal and professional level around purpose. Do I have the skill set while I'm reading the language that doesn't include the people in creating macro level change in social science that I think expertise should be doing? So when I started writing, that was in the back of my mind. Can I borrow from some of the language that I've seen as a reviewer? And it was frustrating, very frustrating to think that the language needed doesn't represent my values in order to do the work that I've been fortunate to do as a scholar and as an activist. So I say, take the journey and enjoy the journey, and take the speed bumps as opportunities to grow and to learn, but also challenge yourself about where your priorities lie and what impact you want to have when it comes to research. And I'll stop there.
Thank you both. I think those are incredibly insightful advice. I'm not going to be nearly as eloquent as Chad was, but we'll go on from there. So the things that I took away from serving as a reviewer are, I'm going to sort of echo actually both of them in saying that the words you use are really important. Jargon is one of those things that as a reviewer, and I am not a geneticist, and so pardon me when I put a little bit of my, the fields that I typically see in there, but if I'm not a geneticist and I hear a lot of genetics related terms, I'm like, I don't actually know what those mean. And for USDA and NIFA, half of the time, the people who know what you do are conflicted out of the review process because they work with you or they are competing directly with you for grants. So frankly, the people who you want reviewing your grants because they're topic experts and will understand what you're saying aren't the people who are doing it. So learning that delicate balance of refining your language so that that jargon is not driving how you're getting your points across is sort of critical. So I tend to actually try to simplify my language and make things understandable, knowing that I can talk about my work to, a college educated person and they should be able to understand it. And that's the level at which the reviewer should be able to understand it. You shouldn't be talking to PhD level for most topics unless you're in a specific RFA, at least in the USDA realm. So other things that have changed my behavior, clarity of thought, as Bart said, re-emphasizing points that you want the reviewers to get is one of those things that you want to make it very clear what your goal, what your objectives are, and how you're going to accomplish that, and how all of the different disciplines usually, because now we're living in a world or writing grants in a world where it's not usually typical single investigators. There's a few out there, but there's not a lot. So when you're working with a transdisciplinary team, how do you make it apparent that you are actually working as a team and it's not for people working together on separate projects? So, sort of marrying that language across the whole narrative is critical. And you don't need to feel like you have to fill every portion of the page with text. As a reviewer, if I see a grant that comes across my desk and there are no spaces, very few images, I'm like, oh boy, this one's going to be fun. And that's not in a good way. I like white space. I like visual relief, things that actually make something pleasant to read. Just like when you're browsing on the web, you don't want to see a lot of text, you want to look at pictures. I look at grants as the opportunity to formulate graphics and other things that can convey what I want to get across. And then my text can supplement that so that I can get the points across. Yeah, don't try to say all you know, because the reviewer is not the expert in your field. You got to say enough so that they know you're good and that you're competent, but not so much that they're bored and they want to move on to the next proposal. And that's probably the hardest thing. So think of it like a story. You want to pull them in from that first paragraph, and then you want everything else to support it. And then you want sort of that closing stuff to sort of reinforce everything. And I'll stop there on this question.
I think going last is going to be easy. You guys covered a lot of it. I think the only thing I would echo is part of what Sarah said, that a grant does not have to be just text. And so those figures, those tables that you choose to include, I think as I served as a reviewer, really influenced my writing. I definitely make sure I include a lot of figures, a lot of tables. I also bold text, I italicize text, things that you would not do in a journal article. You don't have to follow a certain format. I mean, you do to some extent in a grant proposal, but you can do a lot more. So like bolding your goals, highlighting or italicizing keywords that you want the reviewers to pay attention to were things that I appreciated. I also have even read some grants that had pictures of what was going on depending on the intervention or the research task. And sometimes that's really helpful to just have an image of what is happening. And so don't be afraid to put that in. I think the other thing for me that serving as a reviewer has done for my writing is it expanded the way I think about dissemination. So a lot of grants will ask, how are you going to disseminate your results? And so I was amazed. I think I just had, before I reviewed, just kind of done some traditional things of we're going to present at conferences and we're going to write papers, right? And so through reviewing, I was exposed to some different ideas of how to disseminate results. And reviewers really look at that in terms of once you're done with this project, is it going to get out to the public? Or those who need what you've done. And so I think it's important to really think about that as part of your broader impacts and as part of your culmination of the grant is really thinking about, okay, how do I get the research from doing it to the people who need that information?
Awesome. You guys rock already. So, so the next question is kind of a fun one, I think. So what is the strangest comment you've received from a reviewer? Or, I mean, alternatively, like, what is the strangest comment you've had to leave on a proposal as a reviewer? And kind of thinking about, was it a positive or a negative? Did it change your way of thinking about your proposal? If we want to go in reverse order, Brooke, if you want to start off on this one, go for it.
Sure. I had a really hard time with this question. I don't think I've gotten a strange comment. I did one time get a comment that had nothing to do with my grant. So that was kind of strange and disheartening, I think, to what Bart said. You want to make sure that your reviewers are reading it. And reviewers, you want to make sure that you're writing the right thing and checking your work. So it made me disheartened because I was like, did they even read it? So I followed up with the program officer on that one, but I haven't really had a strange comment or had to leave a strange comment. So sorry, guys. Sarah?
That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I don't feel like I have left a strange comment. Someone who's received a review may feel that way, but and pardon me, my computer just decided to tell me it has low battery, and anyhow, hopefully I'll make it through this really quick. The strangest one that I got was I consider myself a water quality expert in water treatment, and they said that there was no one with water quality expertise. And what it made me think about is that I didn't actually sell my expertise. I sold the expertise of everyone else on the team, but I didn't sell my expertise. So I learned that it's okay to talk about what I do and why it matters and that kind of stuff on the grants. And okay, Chad.
And also a question just came in related to this, but if you do get feedback that doesn't match your work, should you be comfortable contacting the program officer? Is that what you would recommend doing? Yeah, I see nods all around. So
Yeah. I think especially with NSF, if a proposal is rejected or accepted and the feedback doesn't match, it's really important to reach out to the program officer and get clarification. And it's not going to change the outcome likely unless the whole thing is off, which I haven't seen that happen. It was just one comment for me. But talking with the program officer is always a good thing to do.
Yes. Thanks for popcorning me, Sarah. Thank you. I have received some what I would call strange comments. One in particular, too much advocacy and activism and not enough research. So Brooke just presented the language, right? We're talking about language and jargon, and we often hear the broaden impact, broadening participation. Well, you're doing this work as a social scientist, and we classify everything, right, from race, class, and gender. You're talking about marginalized populations and communities. We've been granted a confirmed bias of having a level of expertise. Then it's easy to disseminate the information because we should be in the communities working as a partner with those folks that we are studying. And you change the way you approach studying them by collaborating with them from an equity perspective and including them from the beginning of the research project to the end, and compensate them financially as you climb the ladder of success in academia. And that doesn't go well too often with traditional thinking reviewers. And I struggle writing language that doesn't match my principles and values. And those comments that I received, I didn't reach out to the program manager because how do I frame it? I felt that there was no need. There was no need to reach out because this isn't the way writing grants get funded. But I wasn't comfortable enough to change the language to just presenting at conferences, writing a journal article so 7 people that think like me could read it, and they could stand up at an American Society of Criminology conference and just clap for me. And that wasn't enough. So I started switching lanes on where I thought my work and my proposals should land.
Yeah, and in terms of having to leave uncomfortable comments on proposals, I would say I've been in the opposite position as you, Chad, where as someone who straddles kind of social science and computing, I've been in situations where I had to tell a proposer what you're doing can actively harm marginalized communities, right? Like when they say, oh, I'm going to do this proposal on crowdsourcing, and I'm going to extract the most possible value out of crowd workers and try and expand what crowd work can do. I'm like, you're trying to destroy the US labor market. That's what you're trying to do here. So like, you really need to take a step back, and you might write that stuff in the paper, but when you're proposing a $500,000 proposal, you should think about the longer term consequences of your work. And there are, in computer science, I think people are slowly but steadily moving in that direction. And whenever I'm a reviewer, I make sure that I take that perspective and that I bring that perspective forward, because I think it's very important. In terms of having received my own strange comments, I got my career proposal accepted, so I don't really mind the strange comment too much. But there was a strange comment by one reviewer who said, well, why are you making your PhD students do all the work? And I'm like, isn't that the whole point of a career proposal, that I, hire PhD students and train them how to do things? And, again, the proposal got funded, but it was very strange to see, like, I had actually spent significant amount of time thinking about, okay, this PhD student will do this part and this PhD student will do this part, but apparently this person wanted me to do stuff as well, which, to some extent was implied in me advising the students to do certain things, but yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I was really hoping for some real whammies in there, but I think those are all very realistic. So going on to the next question. And I think you guys have touched on this a little bit already, but I wanted to kind of give this opportunity to talk uniquely about your field, especially for any of our participants here that are maybe in your field and are kind of want some of that more localized feedback. But what is something unique that a reviewer is looking for in proposals in your field? And y'all can popcorn each other. Bart, your mic's
Yeah,
still,
I'm still unmuted.
go for it.
So I personally try to look for both a practical and a theoretical contribution. And I think that kind of leads back to something that Chad was saying, like, I want to see the research, but I also want to see the broader impacts, right? And, NSF kind of makes people do this. It makes them talk about broader impacts and the scientific contributions. When it comes to broader impacts, it's kind of lame if you just say, like, oh, I'm going to train PhD students and they may or may not be of like a minority student, or I want you to think more broadly than that. But then in terms of the scientific merit, the field of computing is, and especially human-computer interaction, is rather phenomenological in nature. Like, we like to build stuff and then we've built it, and that's the contribution. I want to see theoretical contributions as well. Can you do something that is not just a thing that you built and then you can show that you've done it, but that can actually be useful for others in the same field to build upon, right? And I think that's a level of contribution that I don't always see in proposals. And whenever I do see it, I get excited.
Again, good stuff there, Bart. I'm not sure if it's unique, but I think what has been consistent, which I find unique in my field, is the need for quantitative data analysis. We're dealing with people in social science, and we're often asked to think about their lived experiences in percentages. And I think it loses some of the value and the intentionality of grabbing those lived experiences as the data. And I think it is secondary data. And there's a cultural appropriation to how you even create a survey based on the educational merits in this country that we live in, right? We aren't that great in America in public education. And when you go to marginalized communities, you really have to be conscious about whether or not you hand a person a survey or you assume, because of those structural barriers, that you should read a survey. And I think a lot of the proposals don't take that, or reviewers don't take that consideration into understanding that that is a very disrespectful way to do this type of research. And it is going to limit your ability to get that raw data. And if you're equipped to understand that space, having that conversation and having a focus group and allowing them to lead you and being able to ask probing questions in the conversations and doing ethnographic work and going to the community and becoming a part of it will allow you to grab data that will be so novel that writing those journal articles and coming up with different broadening impacts will be much more impactful. That I find that unique, that we still want to limit ourselves to survey data and survey data analysis.
So sort of in very different realm, but similar, actually, I think it's similar perspectives in most of the sort of agricultural science and the fields that I work. Most of our grants now require an integrated approach. I think we mentioned this earlier, but where you have to have the research component. But especially with larger grants, you have to have education and an extension or outreach component. And we've been having this for 10 or 15 years. And oftentimes it seems still that the outreach and education side of things are afterthoughts and not truly integrated within the science to the point where we can actually impact change in my clientele groups, which are people who grow nursery and greenhouse crops. So realistically, learning the value of listening to our stakeholders and having focus groups rather than just surveys alone, and giving them the opportunity to chat in a room without us, I mean, having a few prep questions, but letting the conversation sort of evolve naturally and natively, you learn a lot more. And I will echo that completely. So I think it's, how do I want to say this? Within co-PIs on a proposal, I want to see respect for each of the disciplines that are involved, because each of us have critical contributions we can make. And if we actually work together, what we do is so much more impactful than just what one scientist sitting at a desk can do alone. So that's that, and that's what we're trying to get at with a lot of the proposals at USDA.
I think along those same lines as what Sarah has been talking about, is once you have, if you have a well integrated proposal, reviewers are really looking, and I don't know that this is unique, but that you have people on the grant with that expertise, right? And so a lot of times I will see chemists or biology on an education grant, but they have no one with an education background. And so making sure that the team is the right team for what you want to do, I think is important. And then along the same lines as Chad, one thing that I found in reviewing in terms of methods, I've reviewed grants that were much more qualitative, but whether it's qualitative or quantitative, it's very important to explain your methods and show that you have knowledge of those methods. So sometimes I've reviewed and seen that the qualitative methods proposed are, I'm going to do an interview. Well, you still need to validate that interview. You still need to think through how that interview is going to be analyzed. So you need to show that you have an understanding of the methods you're engaged, or someone on your team does. And so I think that's really important, and something that the last time I reviewed, the panel was very particular about, is making sure those methods were rigorous in the research design. So those are the two things I think I would pull out that haven't been pulled out yet.
Yeah, to kind of build upon that, sometimes the project plan is just really important for that, right? Like I sometimes see proposals that have a beautiful theoretical discussion, and then the project plan is basically, yeah, we're going to do that. And it's like, yeah, but how, right? Like you need to actually put down step by step, how are you going to do it? What are your methods? How long is this going to take? Because if you say, I'm going to do an interview study, like, is that going to take you half a year or a year to conduct, right? And depending on where you go, like I've had people say like, oh, we're going to Haiti and we're going to do an interview there. Do you know how much work that is? You know, that takes you 2 years to just set up, right? Like I just had a student go to the Caribbean and do surveys there. That takes a really long time. So you need to show us that you can do that and that you have that that expertise and that you have thought about how those puzzle pieces fall into place. Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Looking at the time, I'm going to kind of combine these next two questions. They're kind of related. So in your experience as a reviewer, what is the most aggravating thing you can see in a proposal? And alternatively, what has a reviewer disliked the most in your proposals? We've kind of touched on that a little bit, but also kind of looking at what is the favorite thing you can see in a proposal and what as a reviewer most enjoyed in your proposals? I know we've talked about, you know, having some white space and having pictures and stuff like that. But, you know, I mean, maybe toot your own horn a little, but what is a reviewer most enjoyed in your proposal? Like, what are you proud of that in your proposals that reviewers have really, really liked about what you've written or how you've presented it?
I'll go first on the things that's most aggravating: typos. If you submit a proposal with typos in it and grammatical errors, it's going to annoy me. So I get somebody else to proofread it. There's this cute little program called Grammarly that the university has a subscription to for free. Use it. It integrates with Word. It's awesome. Just use it. Don't give typos. And you know, if you have someone else helping you collate proposals, make sure they're in the pages are in the right order. That's yet another thing, especially if there's no page numbers. Those are two things that I've seen consistently, and they're annoying. And you could have the best science in the world, but if you can't pay attention to detail, I don't trust that your science is going. I feel like your science will do the same thing and not pay attention to detail. So that's just sort of you know, the subliminal kind of behind the scenes. And to what reviewers have enjoyed, I love doing graphics. So whenever I get the opportunity to make graphics to talk about my science, I do it. And I actually have seen some feedback that the reviewers also enjoyed it. But again, in thinking about it as a reviewer, when I look at proposals and they actually have a wonderful graphic that starts at the front end and explains what they want to do and how everything integrates together and works together, it's a great sell for your work. So
I'm going to echo what Sarah said in terms of typos. That is in grammar, most annoying thing. I think the other thing for me is when terms are not defined well or defined incorrectly. So that is really annoying to me, or not defined at all. So make sure you're defining the key terms that you're using. I think in graphics, I think I said this earlier, that's been the thing most commented positively in my reviews, and also what I most enjoy is how are you going to make this visual for me? So yeah.
Great points. I think the thing that's most aggravating for me is writers being smart rather than being clear. I think sometimes we kind of, you know, I guess in the sports world, you say you read your own headlines. And some of us have indoctrinated ourselves to always use language that may present that we're smart, but we don't have a clear point behind it. I was always taught in my doctoral studies to write as if you're writing on an 8th grade level, because the purpose is to be able to articulate your point, not to confuse your points. And I think that helps you. I know it, as a reviewer, I scored higher when I understood what I was reading. Imagine that. In my experience as a reviewer, the favorite thing in the proposal, I guess that's pretty clear about what I want, right? I want to see how those participants are going to benefit from the work. You know, what more than $10 or $15 that they received in your project, when are we going to go back to assist and them assisted in your career? And what as a reviewer most enjoyed in my proposals, I'm not sure. I'm really not. I can't really think about when I saw superlatives, even though I have received some funding, but I've never felt that there was joy from the language I received from my reviewers. So.
I would think it's probably less common to actually have a reviewer say, I loved this, this was amazing, than it is to find fault. So yeah. And I will say one of the other things, abbreviations. I think 5 is the max that I want to see, because I don't want to have to remember them. If I have to make myself a key when I'm reviewing your thing, so I can remember what your 20 abbreviations mean, you might have used too many. So just that, sorry, I just remembered that and thought it might be perfect.
I just found the strangest comment that I got on one of my proposals, but the first time I submitted my career, it's my own fault, by the way. The comment is, it didn't get funded that time. This is a strong proposal. The Spice Girls quote was distracting and unnecessary. So yeah, that was my own fault. In terms of aggravating things, proposals that say that they're going to do one thing and then they're actually about something else, that tends to happen when you're rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. Sometimes you have to rewrite from scratch when it happens. The multi-PI corollary to that is every PI has their own idea of what the grant is about and it doesn't integrate. That also tends to happen. Very annoying when that happens, because usually those individual pieces are really great, but it's not a single grant. Excessive use of buzzwords, don't try to be smart. Say what you're trying to say. Don't just shove it all onto like, yeah, we're going to do deep learning. Yeah, what do you mean exactly by that, right? And then in terms of what I've gotten, and I've kind of have gotten to get used to a little bit, is in SCIS, where I submit the computer science and engineering, they want you to build stuff, right? Like I like to make a theoretical contribution, and I enjoy it when a proposal makes a theoretical contribution. But other reviewers sometimes want you to tell you what you're going to build. What is it that you're building? Well, I'm studying human phenomena as they interact with computers. No, but you got to be building something. Okay, I'll give it a name. That tends to help. Sometimes that makes reviewers feel like there's a technical contribution. It's interesting because in human-centered computing, you don't always need a technical contribution. But I once had my second time I submitted my career proposal, it went to the wrong directorate, and that was basically got shut down because of that. Like, oh, you're not making a technical contribution. Yeah, that's not necessary in what I do. And then when I do submit consciously to other directorates, sometimes the comment is you don't have an evaluator. And the reason for that is we do our own evaluation. What we do is evaluation. So I've learned to express that I am the one doing the evaluation because that's the science, right? And then usually then it's fine that you don't have, and sometimes then you use an evaluator to kind of do the meta evaluation, like is the project going in the right direction, more than the nitty-gritty details of like indeed sending out surveys and doing interviews, etc. Because that's what I want to do. That's the thing. Yeah. What I like, things that click, right? Like the best reviews that I've gotten on my career consistently all 3 times were, hey, your education plan and your research plan are actually really well integrated. And whenever I see proposals where the education element or the broader impacts element is not an afterthought, but it's really part of the proposal, I really enjoy that. And that typically gets me to give the proposal a very good or an excellent. Yeah.
All right, and then the last question I have here, which is maybe a little rhetorical, but and I think this will kind of lead into, you know, questions from the audience too, is would you encourage others to serve as a reviewer and why? And also probably for our audience here, how might they go about becoming a reviewer in some of the funding agencies that you have served as a reviewer for?
There's nothing a NSF program officer loves more than someone emailing them saying, I want to be a reviewer, because they're always looking for people. You should totally do that. If you've been a reviewer or a proposer before, then they know where to find you. But if you haven't and you want to get on that list, just email them, and you're going to make their day, basically. And I would say it's worth it. It's a lot of work, because yes, you're reviewing 7 20-page proposals. So it's like reviewing 7 journal manuscripts that have $500,000 of funding attached to them. So you better do a good job on them. And it's a tough thing. I cancel my meetings for the week before, typically, trying to get those proposals read. But most program officers that you then deal with at the meeting, they're super nice. They usually give some meta comments on what's happening in the review process. They usually, at the end of the meeting or the 2-day meeting, they reserve some time to talk to you about your proposals. It's a really good opportunity for you to also, you know, present your own ideas. And I really like hearing other people's perspectives and kind of learning from that. NSF pays you as well, so that's nice. It's not a lot of money, but it's something. And yeah, I think you should totally do it. It's a great experience.
You got to get in the game. I mean, this is what we signed up for. I mean, yes. Definitely. It's not even encouragement. I think you should put it on your priority list. That it's about not standing on the sideline and become a part of everything that you whether love or want to change. And it's, as I tell my students, it's hard to be critical of something that you do not know. And most of us make that mistake. And no matter what the speed bumps that I presented here, I have benefited by the actual knowledge of the game. And now you go back in your lab and figure out how to win the game. And I think as a reviewer, it allowed me to have a much broader perspective about what's expected, even if it doesn't get accepted the first time. But it's also about understanding the thinking of the people that are looking at your work. And I take full advantage of that ethnographic opportunity all the time. I think you should be very assertive. I think if you want money from Department of Justice, then you should sit on a panel of Department of Justice first as a reviewer. I've done work with NASA Space Grant as a trained social scientist, and I have reviewed proposals for funding sources for scholarships and internships in the STEM world because of my interdisciplinary approach. But it has allowed me to understand the way STEM is thinking in order to get funding to do some of the macro level change that they want to get done. So this work for me is about a toolbox, right? And there's going to be different jobs and different challenges that come. And respectfully, as a carpenter, you don't use a hammer for everything, right? You need nails, you need a saw, you need a measuring stick. So I would recommend all of us, all of you, to go where you want to participate in the game and serve as a reviewer to understand the process for being on both sides, and it will impact the way you write and impact the way you do your work.
And as a reviewer, you get the opportunity to see some outstanding proposals and how those PIs actually put together a compelling statement of work. And I can't tell you, that is so invaluable, especially, I mean, if you're starting out and you're learning how to write something, if you want to see a good project management plan, sit on a panel. You're going to see one or two of them and you figure out what components work, what are critical, what aren't. And I mean, it's just experience. If you have not seen what a good proposal looks like and you're just, you know, trying to catch them from some of your friends and colleagues, I mean, the review panel is one of those ways that you can actually learn about the art of grant writing. And there's a lot of things that you can learn from reviewing proposals that you won't learn in probably any other venue. And yeah, getting to know the people who are, you know, helping administer the scientific programs and the money is not a bad thing either. And getting to know colleagues across the country and different expertise who might be of assistance and you might want to work with in the future. There's a lot of things that you can get out of a grant proposal. I mean, reviewing grant proposals other than just, you know, the $1,000 you might get from participating on a panel.
I don't think I have anything to add to that wise wisdom. So yes, serve on a panel. It's great.
I will also add that I do recruit reviewers for limited submission proposals and for the R initiative. So if anyone is interested in serving as a reviewer on campus, you know, feel free to email me because I'm always looking for people to review from all expertise. So just my little plug there. But so hey, we got a question. How can a graduate student prepare and or get enough experience to qualify to serve on a panel?
Yeah, so to the grad student question, I don't think that NSF allows grad students to review, which makes sense to some extent. I invariably let my students read my proposals once they are submitted, even the ones that don't get funded. And occasionally I also let them read the reviews. I try to keep those kind of under wraps a little bit because, you know, confidentiality, etc. But I want them to see what went into the proposal that they are going to be funded on, both in terms of the writing that I did, as well as the feedback that we got from the community. So that's typically how I would prepare my students for that part of it. There's also on campus a preparing for the professorate course series that includes a section on grant writing. And one of my students, the one who ended up doing those surveys in the Caribbean, she got a grant, not in the smallest part because she learned how to write grant proposals in that course series. So it has a proven effectiveness. So I would encourage grad students to sign up for that course sequence or that thing because it's very useful. Yeah.
I would also encourage graduate students to take the opportunities and pester their advisors to get to write grants with them, because getting that experience of co-grant writing is one of those things that a lot of, especially if you want to go into academia, that's the one experience you typically don't get much of. So it's incredibly helpful, both for their career and also making them more competitive on the job market after graduation, especially if you've been successful at grant writing. And, you know, NSF has the, there's some fellowship opportunities where graduate students can actually write proposals. Yeah. And USDA has career fellow, for postgrad. Anyhow, there's proposals that graduate students can write and get funded to fund their own work. And it's well worth the effort because it gets you that experience.
One of the things that I benefited from is being working at a research center as a doctoral student was very valuable. And they were doing work in the community. So one of the things I was fortunate to do, working with the YMCA, the YWCA, the Boys and Girls Club, you become that scholar as a PhD student. And there's a lot of assumptions again, right? And I was always asked, would you read over this proposal? We're trying to fund $10,000 to do more outreach in certain neighborhoods. And of course, I would take the proposal back to my mentors to say, hey, am I reading this right? Could you please look over my comments? Because the relationship that we have with this nonprofit organization is dependent upon me to provide good comments. And that is a part of mentoring, that is a part of building your confidence in reviewing, but also building those relationships. So I was fortunate to do a number of those. And if I may slide something in, I ended up becoming a consultant for some of those organizations once the grants were approved, and did outreach in the community and some training. So for me, it was twofold. The last thing I would like to offer is that this is a journey, and I don't have the success rate of my colleagues, but I came into the game understanding that if you don't get accepted, it doesn't mean that it wasn't a good proposal. And that was so big with the self-esteem, with the confidence, and being able to continue to do the work. And there's a fine line again between how long do you continue to go back to the same organization with a rejection, or do you look for another organization that may be a little more, in my perspective, a little more diverse thinking about the value of the work. And so don't beat yourselves down if you don't get the first 10 or the first 5. Just continue that, along the journey that this is a part of it. And those are often labeled as speed bumps, not dead end streets. So.
Yeah, those were some really excellent points. And I want to emphasize that sometimes it's not just the reviewing that can help you, but I think as a PhD student, you learn how to do the research, right? And maybe a little bit of teaching, but how to make your work real is something that some advisors might shield their students from. And so that point of can you be part of that outreach component of a grant? Can you be, can you do some, in our field, it's now all about broadening participation in computing. Can you be part of that? Can you actually help your advisor or others in that aspect? That gives you experience that will help you as a grant writer beyond just being on a review panel. Yeah. And then in terms of effectiveness, my PhD advisor always said, when you're submitting an NSF grant or something like that, success rates are about 20% on average. And if you're a good proposal writer, you can bring that up to 70%, but you cannot, you can't really there's even the perfect proposal gets rejected about at least 2 and 3 times, right? I didn't mean 70, I mean 30%. Yeah. So you don't get to write a perfect proposal that has 100% effectiveness. That just doesn't happen. Yeah.
And I think to those points, when you are rejected, it's really important to have conversations with program officers. You're going to get a different review panel, but often the program officers are the same. And those are the people that can advocate for you in ways that others cannot. And so really taking that opportunity to sell your proposal to the program officer is really important.
All right, well, if we can get a virtual round of applause and chat for our panelists, that would be great. Thank you all again for serving on the panel, and thank you to everyone who came and attended.